I'm really happy to be here. I really am. I was just want to tell you something. I was in my living room just a couple of nights ago, and I told my beloved wife there, Doris, I said, Doris, I probably ought to do a rehearsal here. And she said, okay. And she was sitting on the couch there, and I was pretending that she and 100 people there were out there and that I was speaking. And so she said, are you ready? And she said, well, why don't you go ahead and begin? I said, okay. And I was talking, and about 15 minutes or so later, I said, how's it going? She said, okay. And I said, it just occurred to me something. She said, what? I said, I've been speaking in Spanish the whole time. I'm supposed to give this in English. And that's true. It sounds made up, but it's true. But her English is coming along, and she is from Colombia, South America, and a very, very unique person. Very, very happy to have Doris, and we're happy to have each other. Anyway, I hope I can give you some golden nuggets. Everybody talks about reading a book or going to a seminar or listening to a audio or video and walking away with 1 or 2 or 3 little golden nuggets. So I'm hoping that you're going to get your money's worth, all right? And I've got a hotel down in Texas, and there's a little town a couple of miles away, and they have somebody playing the guitar or singing. It's a restaurant called On the Rocks. And somebody playing guitar or singing every night. And they probably only get $25 a piece, maybe these musicians. There's 2 or 3 of them. But anyway, they have a hat or a gallon bucket or a wash tub or a bushel basket right in front of their little stage, and it says TIPS. All right. So anyway, if you feel like you're getting your money's worth, of course I'll invite tips. And if you're not getting your money's worth, well, I don't know. I guess you could come back up and take some money out of the basket here. We'll call this the basket over here. Just kidding. Anyhow, I really am happy to be here. Always before, when I do a little speech or a seminar or something, I'd feel like I was taking too much time away from my business. And just the last year or so, I've had lots and lots of success in business, and I've had a different approach to life. And I think it helps to have full-time on-site managers that are very good, full-time on-site maintenance people that are very good. Takes a lot of pressure off me. And so that goes a long ways in me being emotionally freed up and to come like here to Des Moines and give this kind of seminar. And I was noticing too, I was just had a little conversation with myself, and that always before I would maybe have myself more in mind than the audience. Well, today I'm going to declare that I have you in mind more than I have myself in mind. So I don't know, we'll see what, a couple of you have seen me speak before, so you can tell me when I get done here if I've made any difference. Okay, this is entitled Multifamily Miracles, and I've written 4 books. 2 of them are published, 2 are not published. Let me just take a second and tell you a little bit. My first book I created the series, by the way, Scavenge Your Way. All right, and I'll tell you how I came up with that title in a little while. So I wrote Scavenge Your Way to Wealth about 5 years ago, and then a couple of years ago I wrote Scavenge Your Way to Real Estate Riches. We've got 2 others ready to publish, and that's why I'm here today and tomorrow. Today's topic, of course, is Scavenge Your Way to Multifamily Miracles, and tomorrow's topic is Scavenge Your Way to Shacks on a Shoestring. All right. So I need to tell you a little bit about my why. Everybody talks nowadays, and when a long time ago, until maybe just a very few years ago, I don't recall anybody saying, well, what is your why? How did you arrive at your why? Where are you going with your why? But I can tell you where I got my why and where I'm going. And I didn't know how quick I was going to get there, but I am a few days away from being 67, so I can tell you how much more I plan to conquer in this very short life that we have here, by the way. You know, we used to think life would last forever, and I think I was 35 before I realized that I was not going to live forever. But anyway, so I could say that the secret to multifamily miracles, of course, we probably ought to define multifamily. What is multifamily? If you have a duplex or a threeplex, can anybody help me answer this one? If we have a fourplex Or do we have to have a 10 or a 20-plex? Or where is the definition? Where's the cutoff between a ordinary structure and where multifamily, the definition of multifamily housing begins? Can anybody tell me that? I'm talking about, yeah. Okay, let's have somebody else take a stab at it. 20 or more? Okay, well, you're a little too under and she's a little too over. So let's get one. Yep, you know the answer, don't you? Yep. Yes, 5 or more. And so I actually bought a 3-plex. I got started in 77. I'm going to show you a little picture here with, I've got since 1977 on my door of my office. Got started in 77, and then 1 year later in 78, I did buy a 3-plex and quickly converted it to a 5-plex. And so 39 years ago, I got started 40 years ago with the shacks, and 1 year later, I could officially consider myself as being involved with multifamily housing. Okay, so I could come up here and I could say there's only about 3 or 4 things you need to know, and that would be finding a way to come up with a down payment, find a way to cross-collateralize your value, your equity, or your collateral, so you're never using your own money, and leverage. And I think that would be it, and I could say any more questions, and if you said no more questions, I would be all done and I could go. My speech would be over. But really, truly, those are very, very big topics, and I think I was investing for 30 years before I ever heard the term cross-collateralization. Collateral is just simply value, equity, and you buy 2 or 3 shacks like I did, put my own sweat equity, right, into the projects, hired almost nothing done. If I needed something done, I'd go pick the brain of a plumber or electrician or carpenter or roofer or flooring installer and did all that stuff myself. But that's how you learn, right? And most of you have been or are now what I'm telling you about where I was. But so anyway, lost my train of thought there for a minute. Might do that once in a while. Okay, that'll be good. If somebody would tell me every 20 minutes or something like that. Pardon me? Oh, there we are. Oh, sure. Okay, well, thank you very much. I will step back every now and then. All right. So anyway, so cross-collateralizing or leveraging, leverage, by doing everything you can to not use your own money, pull the equity out of whatever you have. And I was just starting to say I had about 3 shacks. Went to the bank one day, and I said, I think I've got a little bit of equity. I'm not sure. I'd like to buy another building. And they said it worked out whereby they did an appraisal of my 3 properties, and they said, well, you've got so many dollars. I used those so many dollars, transferred that money or that collateral or that value onto another property, took possession of that other property just with my signature. So I just cross-collateralized you could say 4 loans, the 3 old loans and then the new loan. So like I said, I don't know if I even heard the word till about 10 years ago. I don't know if I could have pronounced it until about 5 years ago. But it really does work, and it's, the key is to not use your own money, leave your own money in your savings checking, IRAs or whatever, and get the bank to recognize your equity, your collateral, transfer that, and the amazing thing, you get to keep what you have, those 2 or 3 or 4 houses you got, they keep producing rent for you, and you don't have to sell. That's one thing that some people preach, fix and flip. But if you're going for long-term wealth, you really need to buy and hold. Buy and hold, buy and hold. It wouldn't hurt if you walked around saying that to yourself for the next 2 or 3 days, because it's really where, if you're looking for long-term wealth gain, that's how you do it. And I started with less than nothing, And I tell people I used to buy bulldozable shacks. I still buy one now and then. They're kind of fun. And I don't need to do the work. I'm working on one right now, actually. And somebody said, well, why aren't you sitting in an office? Why aren't you doing this or that? And so I can see my results right away, and I still love to paint, and it relaxes me and makes me feel good about myself. And I can see immediate progress. I can't always see immediate progress when I'm talking to a banker. He says, well, let's talk about this in a week or two because you need to get a little bit closer to the end of your loan. Now, that's not progress to me. I'm a little accelerated. I want instant gratification when I can get it, although you don't want to have that idea, instant gratification, if you're going to be a long-term investor, because it does take a while. It takes a while. Investing is a slow boat to China. Let's make no mistake about it, a slow boat to China. But here's the thing. If you watch what you buy, you get a little foothold, and you continue to use your equity, you re-perpetuate. All of your equity that you're using is constantly re-perpetuating itself. Why would it be doing that? Because your mortgages are reducing month by month by month. We have a little bit of inflation. You're infusing repairs. You're putting on fascia. You are maybe putting in new windows, maybe putting on some siding, maybe painting the foundation. You're making the street appeal a lot more attractive, and you are creating value. If anybody has questions, hey, if I were sitting there and I had a question, I would jump up out of my seat or I would raise my hand. So I'm never going to hold that against any of you. Okay. So anyway, I had a couple things written down. I usually don't look at my notes because I'm pretty confident just by kind of talking on the cuff. But I had a couple things written down, and let's see here. So establishing my why. What is my why? My why is from being in poverty. I didn't want to be poor anymore. I was in an embarrassingly poor situation. We didn't have anything modern in our house. It seemed like when you're in that situation, whether all your neighbors have everything or not, you think that they all have everything, right? Because you are, excuse me, you are being denied, and that's one of my whys. Okay. My dad intentionally gave us no money. He wanted to make us stronger. He couldn't give us anything except psychology, right? Psychology of he wanted us to be better people. He wanted us to be more appreciative, right? By never having anything, because at that time in his life he couldn't generate very much. He had an illness. He worked in a stone mill. Nobody wore a mask. His lungs filled up with stone dust. We went 5 years without any income. So our income, then he finally qualified for Social Security disability. But during those 5 years, we went to all the city and county dumps. We had an old pickup, and he taught us how to focus like a laser beam on all the stuff that everybody threw away that would make of some value to us, like recycling metals, copper, lead, brass, aluminum, car batteries. Car batteries at that time were really, really heavy and full of lead. I think they probably have less lead in them now. Back then they were really, really heavy, and they paid pretty good money for lead. People at that time in the 50s, you could drive around, you could go to the city and county dumps, as we did quite often. There were no tall fences with locking gates. They're called landfills nowadays. Back then there weren't any landfills, not in where we lived in south central Michigan, and after we moved to central Iowa, north central Iowa. We didn't have that. You could just drive up, throw out whatever you wanted to throw away, walk around, pick out whatever anybody else threw out. And so we survived that way with hand-me-downs and cleaning up those recyclable metals, and until my dad qualified for what they called Social Security disability. Took an act of Congress. At that time, the Social Security had only been created like, I think it was 1935, and the very first recipient, it was like very late in 1939 before America's very first recipient received Social Security. So this was barely, 1939, 1940, 1941, 1942, 1943, 1944, 1945, 1946, 1947, 1948, 1949, 1950, 1951, 1952, 1953, 1954, 1955, 1956, 1957, 1958, 1959, 1960, 1961, 1962, 1963, 1964, 1965, 1966, 1967, 1968, 1969, 1970, 1971, 1972, 1973, 1974, 1975, 1976, 1977, 1978, 1979, 1980, 1981, 1982, 1983, 1984, 1985, 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994, 1995, 1996, 1997, 1998, 1999, 1998, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 1999, 19 like 13 years later when my dad was asking around to see if he could qualify for something, and they were saying, you're crazy. There was not, it took an act of Congress to pass that. So anyway, so that was my why. Always wanting something of value because of never having anything of value. And then some personal problems. I'm colorblind. Anybody colorblind in here? Partly colorblind? I've got a brother-in-law with 2 doctorates, and he's at least partly colorblind. And so when I found that out, I didn't feel quite so bad. Yeah. Yes, I did, yeah. Well, I had 150 units in Texas and in Houston, and then right next door to Houston was Pasadena, or is Pasadena. I had 106 there. Yeah, that's a good question. I was just thinking, I got a couple pictures I'm going to show you here. And so I had a shack and a couple of others, bought the 3-plex I was telling you about and quickly converted it to 5 units. And then I bought the place next door. It was 4 units, and I had 10. And another 10 years went by. I didn't do anything. My wife didn't want me to get involved, and raised up my kids, went to graduate school. And so one day this house come along, and I knew that I could, it was 4 or 5 units, and I knew that some of the rooms were big enough that I could create a couple more studios. And anyway, I come out with 8 units. So I had those 10 units, and then almost 10 years later, I got this old house. I've got a picture of it. And I had, within a few months, working really, really, really hard, I had 8 more units. And I was just telling somebody the other day, I think my brain went from the size of a walnut to the size of a bushel basket. Just in that, I thought, wow, I got 18 units. I'm from a little town of 300 people. People from a town of 300 people, they're not supposed to have 18 units. Whoa, huh? I had somebody tell me, or ask me when I bought a building on Main Street in Marshalltown. That's where I live, by the way. Hope everybody's heard of Marshalltown, Iowa. And a lady, and she's very well-meaning, very nice person. She said, Steve, did you buy that whole building? That's the mentality of people from small towns. They just don't stretch their imagination. I said, well, I don't think they would have sold me half of it. We have to train ourselves to, that's why we need to go to these kinds of seminars. We can stretch our thoughts. We can build our imaginations. We can begin to see things that other people show us and teach us, right? We all learn from other people. None of us were born and then just learned everything ourselves. It never once happened. We all learn from one another. So anyhow, that unit, I sold on December 28th of last year, the 106 units. I pulled 1.64 million in cash. I had that exactly 5 years. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And so I'd always heard about 1031 exchanges, and I kind of knew what they were, but I never had dealt with one directly. I called up Ken Tharp. Andrew has had Ken Tharp here before. It's all he does all of his life, and he continues doing that, is specialize in 1031 exchanges. And he explained it all to me. He said, yeah, that would be really good, Steve. You only have so many days to put your money in a 1031 exchange, and then you have to have bought at least one property within 6 months or 180 days, or you have to forfeit that 25% tax break that you're going to get by creating another purchase and utilizing a 1031 exchange. So when they give you a sheet, there's only 3 lines on it. It's 1 page. It's only 1 page. You hear 1031, you say, well, it must be dozens of pages. No. It says that it's the act of simplicity. It's only 1 page, 8.5 by 11. And there's 3 lines on there. And you can only declare 3 properties. So I had a realtor had just called from Des Moines area. He'd helped me with a couple other properties. He said there's a couple motels down here, one in Urbandale, one in Des Moines. And I got to thinking, and I thought, well, I wanted the Comfort Inn in Texas for sure, down by Houston. I had that on the top line. I thought, well, I don't know if I can swing this or not. I went ahead and put those 2 motels on those other 2 lines. And lo and behold, everything worked out. And within 14 days, I took possession of 2 motels and 1 hotel. And my monthly net income went up by, let's see, 26 and 30 is 56,000. My net income went to 56,000 a month more than it was. And I didn't want to tell you this in the beginning because I didn't want anybody to get jealous and walk out on me, because those are the numbers that I've always dreamed of, but never thought I had a shot at it. And just like that, if you stay in the trenches, stay concentrated, look for opportunities, keep your head up, good things will come your way in anything, real estate or whatever it is. And I never thought I'd have $1 million a year net income. That's where I am right now. Yeah, and I have more free time than ever before. Life is getting better. And somebody said, well, Steve, you're looking younger. I said, no, my wife talked me into putting some tin on my hair. That's all it is. But anyway, I got a lot of good stuff here. I wish I had 3 or 4 hours. I've got 5-6 hours worth of material here, and I'm not going to, but I can get some feedback from some of you, and I can give you my best shot here at what I can do in an hour. And I have, I have 27 minutes left. Wow, I'm going to do everything I can to get you your money's worth, right? Yeah.
Are you holding that doll up there?
Oh, you know what? That's my brother holding that doll, and I'm the little guy to the right of him. And this was in 1954, and nobody had ever taken a picture of us before that I could remember of. That was in 1954, and I was born in 1950. I was 4 years, just within a month or so being 4 years old there. Yep, and that car was, that property, that's a lean-to on one side of a railroad car. We lived in a railroad car. And that was something. Huh? No, this was in South Central Michigan. My dad ran out of work in the 30s, went out to Michigan because he had an older sister that married a guy from Michigan. And went out there, stayed on their couch looking for work, and found some work in this stone mill that he never should have gotten involved in, which eventually took his life. But he ran into my mother, met my mother, and I'm the next to the youngest out of 6 kids. And so this was out in South Central Michigan. This is in Lansing is the capital, Ingham County, and 8 miles south is Mason, and we were 2 miles south of Mason. But that is a converted railroad car, and this is a lean-to on one side where we had a living room and had a potbelly stove. We burnt coal and wood. We had then the middle part was the caboose, and then on the other side was another lean-to, and that was our dining room table, and we had a cook stove, we burnt wood and coal, and it was just a windbreak. I mean, it wasn't a house. It was just it was a roof over our head and walls to break the speed of the wind. I'll tell you many times when the fire goes out. Has anybody ever slept somewhere where it's been real cold outside and that you only have wood and coal to burn, you don't have gas or fuel oil, and the fire goes out, and you wake up and it's like 0 degrees inside your house? I'll tell you what, to rekindle that fire, a lot of times there's just enough coals in there in the bottom where you can get a fire going relatively quickly. When those coals go completely out, and it's like 0 degrees in there, that's pretty cold. It's a hair-raising experience, I'll tell you. So anyway, that's from my first memory, and my aunt came down. That's my grandmother standing in the door, and she took a train from Marshalltown, Iowa, and went to Lansing, Michigan, and got there the day before, and went to my aunt's house, my dad's sister, and she got her Browning camera and bought some film and called. We did have a telephone, didn't know, we had radio, but no TV, and none of the, we didn't have an indoor toilet, we didn't have running water, we had a pump outside. Anyway, so I remember that very clearly because it seemed like nobody ever took a picture. It was the first time I remember anybody taking a picture. And somebody said, well, why are you all squinting? I said, well, it was getting very late in the day. I remember we were calling up saying, are you still coming today? And I remember my Aunt Helen said, yeah, we'll be there. We're just running a little late. And the sun goes down and at the end of the day, and we're all looking right into the sun and squinting. There's something very unusual about that picture, and then I'm going to, just a minute, if I can get, let's see. I don't want to cut anything off here. I guess I'm cutting my mom's head off. But there's something very unusual about that picture. And I use this one other time for one of my talks here in Des Moines. So if you know what the answer is, just be quiet, would you? Don't reveal the answer. All right, now look at that picture and tell me what's unusual about it. Oh, I'm the little guy on the. You see my brother holding the doll, and then I'm on my brother's left. Okay, I'm on his left. I had pure blonde hair at that age. There is no little girl. There is no little girl. That's a doll in the hand of my brother. No, that's me with long hair. My mom let my hair grow real long because she had 3 daughters before my brother and I came along, and sometimes she'd put girls' clothes on us to stretch the budget, and so she wanted our hair to grow long so that people might think that we were girls, my brother and I. Oh, yes, he's about not quite a year and a half older. Yeah. So I'm next to the youngest out of 6, and I'm the 5th born here. My little sister didn't come along until a few years later.
The doll face is real odd looking.
The doll face. Well, this is 1954. I don't know. I don't remember. I remember my brother carrying that around all the time. It was just like that everywhere we went. My brother Bob, he'd carry that doll. I remember very clearly that he'd always have it. But the details of what it was, I don't know if it was a horse or if it was a rhinoceros or, I don't even know what it was. Anyhow, so we get off that. Who is? Yeah, yep. Well, you pretty much hit the answer there. We're all shoeless. Every one of us standing in that picture. I was going to go on to something else. I forgot that I'd ask you a question. You can start to lose your memory at my age, and people won't get down on you too much. You can blend it with a joke. But so anyway, yeah, we were all shoeless there, and we went shoeless until September, first week of September. School year started back then. I think they moved it up a week or two, and it seemed like all the school years are starting in August now. I went to a little one-room country school right down the road, about the equivalent of maybe a block and a half. And that was an experience in my kindergarten year. So anyway, I was going to, like I said, I've got 4 or 5 hours of material here. I wish I could talk to you all day. I really do enjoy telling you about this and reliving some of my experiences, and hopefully I'm passing along some useful information. Some of my earlier places were shacks, and a lot of them I bought from between $4,000 and $10,000. Whoa, let's see here. Let me get... And I apologize for this. The very next time I bought this, and the company said it's our very best projector. And years ago I taught, way back in the Stone Age, I taught a little bit. And I was so happy with an overhead projector like that. I could talk to my class, and I could make up my little transparencies, and so I had this in mind. But I apologize. From now on, I'm going to have a PowerPoint for you. It'll be probably a little bit easier. I don't mind it, but it's the blurriness. I don't know. I just asked Arnie earlier, and for whatever reason, we don't know what's causing the blurriness. But so anyway, so that house, I gave $10,000 for it. I sold it a year or so later for $49,900, and I'm going to show you what it. Keep a look at it there, and now I'm going to show you what it became. All right, there you go. So that's what putting a little TLC into a property can do. This only made me about between $8,000 and $9,000. I usually try to make much more money than that. Years and years and years ago, 40 and a half years ago when I got started, if I could make $8,000 or $9,000, I was on top of the world. But nowadays, I wouldn't even consider doing anything for at least $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, $18,000 profit. What you do is you just block out all of those deals until something better comes along. Just keep focusing, and good things will come your way. And I have a question for you, and I drew a little diagram sitting over there a while ago. Now, I'm going to get on to multifamily, but this is where I got my start, okay? And I know maybe I'm dragging too long on that, but it's, everybody has to have a clear definition of how they got started. So here I'm going to give you something. I was going to have you take a napkin and draw a square, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to speed it up here a little bit. Only 18 minutes, oh my God. So I went ahead and did this for you. Okay, So you can see the upper right, it says porch. I was just going to have you draw a square. And then off to the left, you've got BR and BR. And in the middle, I have bath. This is exactly the house that I just showed you. And then on the right-hand side, the upper right, as I just mentioned, I have porch. And then below porch, I have KIT for kitchen. And then below that, I have LVRM for living room. Now, these little, let me grab my pen just for a second. These little darkened areas are the doorways. So the porch is actually out here, and I'll put it back up in just a second. This is the doorway. You go in the living room. Here's a little doorway going into the bath. Excuse me. Here's the doorway going into this bedroom. And then from the bath, there was another door going to that bedroom. And here's a little doorway here going to the kitchen. And then through the back of the kitchen was going out to the porch there. And there's a little doorway there going to the porch. Okay, and that's the exact diagram of this house. Okay? So here's my question. I bought it as a 2-bedroom and I sold it as a 3-bedroom. How did I do it? Raise up your hand. How did I do it?
Did you enclose the front porch or something?
No, I didn't enclose the front porch. Yes, sir. Pardon? I can't hear you. No, there's no second story. No. Pardon? No, I didn't add not a single square inch. I added not a single square inch of square footage. Yes. I did not do that. I did not do that. No, I did not do that either. What's that? That's right, and I sold it as a 3-bedroom, and they were all good-sized bedrooms. Yes, I bought it exactly like this. And how did I come up with a 3rd bedroom without adding a single square inch of square footage? It has a basement, but I did not use the basement. I didn't tear down any walls. No, I didn't add any walls. All right, now listen. That house is right next to another one I have. I got it for $4,000. If you come tomorrow to Shacks on a Shoestring, I've got a picture of the little house that I paid $4,000 for right next door to this. And I kept saying to myself, I got to have it. It'll sell a lot quicker. It'll sell a lot quicker. Let me get that up here again. And this is a masterpiece. This house is massive. I'm sorry for the blurriness. It won't happen again. Even though they told me this was the very best projector that was on the market. No, I didn't, and I didn't. You see, you guys are not thinking outside of the box. You're just sitting there coasting along mentally. But I've had to think outside, but we all have to do that. We all have to think outside the box. I was in that house. It sat vacant for several years, and there was always some kid that'd come along, kick the door in, and I'd just take a little walk through there, and it kind of occurred, what can I do if I bought this? As a matter of fact, the landlord had sold me a couple of other houses a few years earlier, and he said, someday I'm going to sell you that house. He said, I don't think my grandson wants it, and so I was kind of hanging on to it for him, and he said, one of these days I'm going to sell you that house. So I'd go in and out of there a little bit more often. I know he's going to sell me that one of these days. So what did I do? I'm not a magician. No, I'm a simple person. I'm not a simple-minded person, but I'm a simple person. I am stark simplicity. Here's what I did. I'm going to put the same by... Pardon me? Excuse me. No, there was no attic, and there was a little deal, yeah, but no, there wouldn't have been head clearance there at all. No. Here's what I did. All right. Got a bedroom, living room, kitchen, and porch. I simply took the cabinets out of here and declared that a bedroom. And I put the kitchen right here along this wall right here. So the kitchen was at the end of the living room. And just that quickly out of thin air, lightning fast, I had a 3-bedroom house. Well, the kitchen was at the end of the living room. Yeah, was at the end of actually it wasn't completely square. The living room was more like about right there. So this was maybe like an 11 by 12. So this right here was maybe 14 feet from the entrance back here. The what room? Maybe I did. What's that? What I just showed you? Oh, okay. All right. So you know, and just think about it. We've got some brain power. You've all graduated from high school, went to college. You've been in a lot of strange situations. You had to fight your way out. That didn't occur to me for a long, long time. You know how that occurred to me? I had one of my helpers. A very, very simple sort of guy. You know, I'm a simple kind of guy too, but he's more simple than I am. And he said, "I can tell you how to do that, Steve." And I said, "All right." And he explained it to me just like I explained it to you. And I thought, whoa, why couldn't I think of that? Anyway, so that's, now if you come to Shacks on a Shoestring tomorrow, you may or may not, but I'll just spend about a minute or so on that. And so we got a lot of things to do here. And, oh no, we're down to 12 minutes. Oh my God. So anyway, I spent 20 years running my business out of my hip pocket and out of off the dashboard of my pickup. And then the last 20 years, I bought this building in the 90s. I had an office and a phone in there. This lady here come to me almost 10 years ago, and she had a fabulous reputation, and she had been let go out on the south side. She was managing 136 units, which is probably the largest complex in all of Marshalltown, Iowa. And the owner didn't get along with her husband so well, who was doing maintenance. And so he found a way to let both of them go. So I knew I had a treasure with her. We have moved mountains together. And I had 96 or 97 units then. And now we're probably between 600 and 700. And if I added what I've sold, I sold 150 units in Houston, Texas, and I sold 106 in Pasadena. Those are the two biggies that I've sold. So we would be getting close to 1,000. Yes, sir. Yeah, I stay in contact with realtors, and they say, this is a very, very good price. You might want to think about selling that. And I agree. Older properties that are 40, 45, 50 years old, the plumbing problems tend to get a little worse. Electrical problems tend to get a little worse. Every time it rained, it was almost like it flooded. There was just water standing on the property for hours until it started sinking in. Things like that. And lots and lots of years on that property. And so I'm happy that I did, and that really got me rolling. And then in my yes. No, because just if you connect with, it only takes one realtor to find one buyer. And so, no, he sold it relatively quickly. And 1.64 million, whoa. And I've done pretty well on properties before, but never, ever, ever did anything like that. Yes, Pasadena, Texas, yes. Yeah, just outside of Houston. Yeah. So this is in my first book, and sorry, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to have a PowerPoint. And that's my first 50 properties, and I have that hanging in my office up in Marshalltown. So just kind of gives me a little bit of credibility, I guess. So anyhow, and I've probably bought, a little under 100. Now, I'm not counting if I buy 100 units. That's only one purchase. You see what I'm saying? That's only one purchase, even though there's 100 units there at that site. That's only one purchase. But my purchases are getting very close to 100. See what I'm saying? 100 different ones. Yes. I had a very good question. This one here is the one that I bought and converted it to 8 units, and I went from 10 units to 8 more, which gave me 18, which I thought I was really flying, and I thought it was too much because I'm a little guy from a little bitty town in north central Iowa, and nobody expected anything like that of me. And I was even walking around wondering, like, oh, I better not buy any more, had I, And there's a fear factor too. You got to conquer the fear factor. I was telling somebody the other day, the first 10 houses I bought, roughly, I didn't get any sleep that night that I signed, put my signature on the paper, went home, went to bed, and my heart was just throbbing. Man, it's not made up. So there's a fear factor with everything. You have to find a way to conquer fears, and I found a way. Now I can buy 150, 200 units, or a motel in Austin, or a hotel, and wake up the next morning and sit down and start to read the paper, and maybe it's a half hour, an hour later before it occurs to me that the day before I just plunked down $4.4 million on a Comfort Inn. That sure wasn't the case a few years earlier. You got to find a way to conquer fears, and that's a big part. That's a big part of it. So I had 8 units. Then I had. I wanted to show you a property that I'm really proud of, and I had it just right here at my fingertips. Darn it! Shoot. Oh, hang on just a second here, and I'm gonna. Pardon me. This one here. Yes, I took almost a 10-year hiatus. I had 3 properties, a 5-plex, a single family, and a 4-plex. My wife didn't want any. Andrew was saying yesterday that that if the phone rang after 5, his wife didn't know. His starter wife. I had a starter wife too. Some of you have. Any of you had? Yeah. Some of you had starter wives, right? And yeah. So. But she didn't want me to do any investing, so 10 years went by and I didn't do anything. I did go to graduate school, did watch the kids grow up, and then I ran into this deal, the one that you see there now, and I knew I had to have it, and even though it was against her wishes, and so that, and then another deal came along. And it was an old motel, and I've got the picture here. Somebody can't put my fingers on it. I feel like I'm going to run out of time. But it was an older motel, and yeah, I could go back there and let me just show that to you because it's worth showing. Okay, hang on just a moment. Yeah, and I've got it right. It'll be just a second. Here it is. Yes. Sometimes I talk to real small groups, and I was out at Walmart one day, and I decided to blow up some pictures. And so I don't need a slideshow or anything. I can just, if I've got 10 people here, then that's all I have to do is show my pictures. But this is an old motel, and I had gone with these people's niece, and Orly and Leo, and I talk about them in my first book. I never heard of any man by the name of Orly, except for him, O-R-L-E-Y. I never heard of any lady by the name of Leona. I heard of Leota with my brother's mother-in-law, but not Leona. I think I did hear of Leona once or twice later on, but not Orly. So Orly and Leona, I'd gone with their niece, and they remembered me. And they said, Steve, we've got the old motel out on Iowa Avenue in Marshalltown, and we sold it on contract and got it back. Would you be interested? And I said, well, I might be. And she said, well, we've left the key at such and such a place. She said, why don't you go, and would you promise me to go take a look at it and call me tomorrow? And I said, yes, I guess I could. And so I called up who I considered my mentor, an older guy by the name of Elmer, and he was like a father to me. My dad died just before my 12th birthday, and he had hotels and motels and apartment complexes, single-family dwellings, and just a real great guy. We just had a natural chemistry. We were just really, really drawn to one another. And so he met me out there about a half hour after this phone call from Orly and Leona. And we walked through it, and he said, Steve, he said, what did they say would be their bottom dollar? And I said, well, they said they wanted $100,000, but that they might come down to 90. He said, well, you ought to be able to get that motel for for less money than that. And I said, yeah, that sounds a little high. And so we had agreed that maybe my highest dollar would be $75,000. So that next day, I no more than had gotten up, made a little coffee, and the phone rang, and she said, Steve, this is Leona. She said, did you have a look at the motel? And I said, yes. She said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, And I'd known enough about real estate at that time to sort of start throwing curveballs in a very nice way because she was a lovely lady, a lovely person. And I said, well, there's it needs thermal panes, and the doors will look very good, and one of these days it's going to need a roof. And I just went on, and she said, well, she said, would you give $60,000? She said, Orly and I have been talking, and we would make it available to you for $60,000. And I said, she said, well, I'll tell you what. She said, you sleep on it tonight, and let's talk again in the morning. You promised to call me in the morning. I said, okay. So that next morning was only 48 hours later, right, from the very first phone call. And it was in mid-November, and things were getting pretty cold. She didn't want it to freeze and break. And the last tenant had moved out of this motel, or daily visitor, or whatever you want to call them, just a few days before that. She got it back on a contract. And so she calls the next morning, same thing. I'd barely gotten out of bed. It might have been 7:45, something like that. And she said, Steve, this is Leona. How are you doing today? I said, fine. She said, well, what do you think? And she said, well, is it worth $60,000 to you? And I said, I wanted to say yes, and I want it right now, and I'll give you that. And I thought, just throw her one more curveball and delay it just a tiny bit. Something entered my head to say, just delay it a little bit. So I started saying, the roof, it's really going to need a roof here very soon. And I went on, and about 15 seconds into the conversation, she said, Steve, she said, if you can bring me a check, or not a check, she said, if you can bring me a signed contract by mid-afternoon today, she said, we'll let you have that motel for $30,000. And the phone almost fell out of my hand. And you see, then I had 35, 40 units by that time if I added that. There were 15 units at that motel, by the way. So listen, success can be defined by two words. What are those two words? Stumbling forward. That's all I've done all my life. I have stumbled forward. Success can be defined with those two words. And boy, I was flying then. Then I started thinking, oh, maybe I could have 50 units in my lifetime. And not only that, but 50 units paid for. Whoa! That's a lot for a little guy from a little bitty town in north central Iowa, but maybe I can handle it. And I had to keep psyching myself up. I never thought I could get near 1,000 units. Never thought I'd have $1 million net income each year. And I feel good, and I'll probably do a little bit more investing. We've got about 2 minutes left. Any questions very quickly? I've got a whole lot more information. I didn't get to it, and I'm sorry. But come to Shacks on a Shoestring tomorrow. Yes? Oh, well, thank you. Yep. Okay. Well, I would use a little less sweat equity because my dad really drove us for every ounce of energy he could get out of us. And so I thought that, boy, I had the energy and I had the focus and I had the muscles, and I couldn't let him down even though he was in his grave years and years and years. There's just crazy things in your head, And so what was the second question? Well, about 3 to 4 months ago, I just spent $9 million. We did a motel. I bought a motel. I say we, me, myself, and I. That's three of us, right? A motel here in Urbandale, a motel in Des Moines, and a 78-room Comfort Inn down by Austin, Texas. And one day later, which was the 15th day, because I did all of those 3 deals in 14 days. Didn't plan it that way, but there were delays, and they all kind of bunched up. Very next day, my wife's from South America, and we bought a condo down there, a luxury condo, and we can rent it out. It's on the north coast. Bogota is lovely, but it only gets up to 66 or 68. A lot of people there with money, 15 million people. Jump on a plane in an hour, they're up on the north coast, and that's where we have the condo. And we can rent it during the peak season and make really good money on it while we're not there, and if we decide to be there. And if it's during a peak season, we just have to call the agent and say, hey, we're going to be there for about a week. Don't try to rent it during that week that we want to be there. So going forward, if it's a good deal, I know of a guy who was suffering from cancer, and he was out at an auction a few days before he died, and a friend of mine saw him and said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I got a chance to buy this." And he said, "You know what?" He said, "It's a good deal." He said, "I've got to have that." And he died a few days later, you know. But we get it in our blood. We're investors. We don't know when to stop. Well, we don't do anything as crazy as we used to as we get older. You know, we do learn a little bit from wisdom that accumulates over the years. Anybody else? I think I'm a yes.
This may sound crazy, but are you building all this for your retirement? And give it to charity someday?
You know what? I don't know.
Waiting for you to die.
Mr. Landlord last night said, "Steve, you're exactly the guy I'm looking for." He said, "I want you to join my speaking tour." I've got several other books in mind. Building a Legacy. I've got 2 kids. I've got 4 grandkids. I like to, there's 36 in my graduating class from Union Whitten, 2 little towns in north central Iowa. And I like, have you ever been there? For heaven's sakes. Well, maybe I know who she is. And I probably mowed her grass. I mowed 22 yards a week when I was 15 years old. You'll have to tell me who she is in a little while. But, so, did I answer your question?
Just to find your family's going to do what you do.
They should be. You know, you have to give it to them in little parcels, little pieces, because you would be foolish to leave a huge chunk of money all in one shot. Because if they've never had to earn it themselves, they never had to sweat blood like I did, chances are they're not going to hang on to it. So you're doing them a favor by only giving them a little bit at a time, depending on how you write your will. You know, so I have that to think about. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. It's a great job.
Thank you very much.
Always enjoy listening to you.
Oh, I forgot to say I've got some books. I got about 15 or 20 books at the back. They're $15 each. They're only $15. And some of you, 1 or 2, 3, 4 of you have already bought my books, maybe more than that of you. And I'll sign them and I'll date them. And if you'd like to have one, the very interesting one is this step-by-step walks you through how to make $1 million. And I even have a pattern there, how you can start with nothing and buy 1 or 2 at a time and work your way up to $1 million in assets. I've laid that out in one of the chapters. And so, and then the other one is about my background and how I grew up and how I found investment strategies. So Scavenge Your Way to Wealth and Scavenge Your Way to Real Estate Riches. And this book will be coming out, Scavenge Your Way to Multifamily Miracles. And tomorrow's topic, Scavenge Your Way to Shacks on a Shoestring, will also be coming out soon. And so at the back of the room, if you want to buy a book or 2, we'll be happy to sell you one. And thank you again.
All right, let's give him one more round of applause. Great job.
Thank you.